It's Bigfoot Collectors Club with Bryce, Michael, and Ivy. I know a story of high strangeness or two. Let's do this.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Bigfoot Collectors Club, the show where we talk to amazing guests about their personal paranormal history and share stories of high strangeness. I am your host, Michael McMillan. With me always is your other host,
Bryce Johnson.
And our super producer,
Riley Bray.
Oh boys, we have an exciting guest this week that that has a unique connection to Bryce and a brand new movie that is available right now exclusively on Shudder called Allegora. I'm very excited to get into this, but before we do that, guys are just jumping right into it because I want to get to our guest.
Yes.
Got to do a little clubhouse keeping, all right?
Let's do it right now. Guys, if you've been breaking waves on jet skis down at the local waterway this summer, then we hope you've done so while wearing your official BCC jet ski summer shirt by James Mulholland, which is on sale right now at our TeePublic shop, which you can check out by clicking the link in the episode description or clicking the link in our bio on Instagram at Bigfoot Collectors Club and on Twitter at Bigfoot Pod. Now, when the summer ends, this t-shirt rides off into the sunset like we did on those Chef's Kit jet skis, so be sure to pick up yours today.
That's right. Good delivery on the chef's kiss ad lib. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Also,
Welcome.
Riley, I just want to make sure you're not like quietly crying and we need to check in with you because we basically skipped the chit chat. You doing okay over there?
No, I'm great. I'm
Okay,
excellent.
good.
Thank you for checking. I appreciate it.
I just wanted to. Speaking of checking, we want to thank everyone who has checked out our Patreon, BCC The Other Side, this month. Remember, August is Try Out the Patreon month. A $5 monthly pledge keeps the lights on in the BCC Clubhouse and unlocks 3 bonus episodes that are very exclusive, plus three episodes a month, of course, plus our entire backlog of exclusive BCC The Other Side episodes.
And if you're feeling extra supportive, $9 monthly pledge unlocks the ultra terrestrial tier, which gives you exclusive access to the BCC soundtracks by me and other songs that I've written and a bunch of other cool things that you can't get anywhere else.
Well, there you go. What are you waiting on? And finally, just a big thing. And be sure to follow, rate, and review BCC on your favorite podcast app. And if you write us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, we might read it on the air, like this one.
Mumsy9 says,
Mumsy.
Long overdue. I've been listening to this podcast for years, thanks to godmother of the podcast, Jen Kirkman.
Hello.
I love how the show has evolved, and in particular, I appreciate all of the hard work and production of the Jet Skis special.
Well, there you go.
Keep it up, boys. Thank you for the weekly entertainment. 5 stars.
Beautiful.
Thanks,
Mumsy9 nailed it. Jen, special Jen Kirkman shout out. You know, listeners, Jen moved, I think, like not full time, but she's in New York City this year, which is why she's not been on the podcast much, if at all. It's been a while in 2020.
We got to get her back. Shout out to Kirkman.
We got to get Jenny K back, godmother of the show. She's the one who introduced us to Riley. And she's just one of our favorite recurring guests. It's not that we don't love Jen. She's just been very busy and working in a different time zone. And you know that woman, if you're a fan of Jen, she likes to go to bed at 9 o'clock. So we're going to have to figure something out. All right. Speaking of awesome women, Bryce, why don't you introduce this week's guest?
Perfect. Our next guest is a creative force to be reckoned with. She's the front woman for the LA-based Old Insanity band, KRSY FOX, as well as the creator of a slew of critically acclaimed and audience-praised horror shorts like Frank and What the Spell. She's acted in movies like Underworld Evolution and In the Land of Women, and she just produced, starred in, and composed Allegora, a horror anthology movie about a group of artists whose lives become unwittingly entangled as their obsessions and insecurities manifest monsters, demons, and death. Exclusively out now on Shudder. Please welcome to the clubhouse, KRSY FOX.
Hey, that was
Welcome,
wonderful.
Chrissy.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you so
Thanks for
much.
being
Happy
here.
to be here. Oh, I'm
Bryce,
so
I feel
happy
like
to
you
be
could
here.
do a little. Bryce, I'm sorry, Chrissy. I have a note for Bryce.
No.
I feel like Bryce, you could do a little bit better with the delivery of what the spell. Maybe.
Oh, I know. I got excited. I rushed it. Sorry. It happens all the time.
Well, let's hear
It's
it. Let's
okay.
hear. Try it again. Try it again. We can all go
What
around
the
and say
s-
what the
the spell?
Pretty good, Riley. Let's hear your delivery.
What the spell?
That was.
Here you go.
Oh, I like
great.
that one. Yeah.
I'm gonna try it. What the spell?
Yeah,
No,
you had a
too
vision for it.
I
get
don't
it.
know. I don't know.
Chrissy,
about any of it.
Chrissy, how should we deliver it?
Okay, it'd be like, what the spell? Maybe like that.
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hell
Yeah.
yeah.
That's beautiful.
Well, I feel
That's
like
great.
I can't be Riley.
Yeah.
None of
That's
us
pretty
can.
good.
That's the problem with our
I
lives.
hardly can. I tell you, it's a lot.
Chrissy, it's
Oh
so
my
great to have you
gosh.
on the show. We had, I don't want to say your better half, because clearly you must be the better half.
Oh no, he's my much worse half. Yes.
Yeah, there you go. We had Spider One on the show back in episode 129, and we know that you lived in a haunted apartment, and I think we all agree we need to hear your side of the story on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. We saw a video with that too.
We
That was-
did. It's still on our reels
Yeah.
if people want to watch it.
Man.
Let's get into that, but before we do, let's hear a little bit about Allegoria, which Bryce, you are also in. I watched the movie last night. It was so much fun, very creepy, very gross.
Oh,
if you like
thank
gore,
you.
it's great stuff. You're
Nice.
great in it. Talk to us about Allegoria. What's the movie? What's it about? How did it come to be?
Well, first of all, I got to play Bryce's girlfriend in this, which was very fun because he was awful to me in this movie. So, and he is not an awful guy at all. So it was pretty funny, actually. But no, Allegoria started out actually as a short. So the first segment of the film stars John Ennis, and he's this horrible acting coach who bullies this small acting class, and ends up that my character gets revenge on him at the end. And so it just started out as that, and Spider was kind of, dwelling in it because, this is something he had written and directed, and he's like, I feel like there's more to this, and I agreed, and I'm like, I think we need to produce this more as a feature, not necessarily anthology, because all these stories are connected, and my character shows up in the first story and the second story, which stars Bryce, and then I come back around in the fifth story, which is the final story. So it's cool to watch this film because every single segment you can piece all the people together, and at the end you're like, oh, okay. So it's really just about tortured artists and kind of the demons that you can bring upon yourself as an artist. And
we don't
it's a
know
really,
anything about that.
I know, right?
Can't relate. Yeah.
Yeah, you needed like a really frustrated podcast host in that movie. I always say that's one thing
I know. Well, that's the sequel. But
it's
yeah,
great.
it was great.
Yeah,
It was a
super
great
fun.
process to do. Thank you.
How did it come about? So you guys, because I think all the chapters work really well on their own as well. Like you could just watch the chapters, but it does pay off if you sort of see it as that collective. How did it go from filming it to getting it on Shudder? Who, by the way, Shudder needs to be like an official sponsor now. This is like the second Shudder film we've had on in the past month. How did it end up being over there?
We were super, super lucky. When we made this film, it was we actually shot the Ennis segment, the first one, 2 days before the full lockdown from COVID.
Oh, wow.
And
Oh,
then,
wow.
yeah. Oh, sorry. Hold on one second.
There's a lurking
Sorry.
cryptid in the back.
Yeah, there was something going on.
Are
Sorry.
you
It's
still
fine.
in a haunted house?
A little foot.
Yeah, let me start again. Yes, I am. No, so it started out just, when we filmed the first segment, it was 2 days before COVID, the full lockdown, before anyone understood, what was really going to happen and that we were in a full pandemic. So we shot this segment, and if you watch it, it's so horrible to watch because he just spits the entire time all over me.
Yeah, I saw that. I went to
So-
school. I went to school with a guy who did that when he was acting, and it was like everyone needs to stand 5 feet back from him because it's coming flying.
Oh yeah, no, I was soaked, and I don't think anyone else understood till they watched, the dailies later, and were like, "Oh my god!" I'm like, "Yeah, It
Wow.
was crazy, but it worked. It was effective." So we always joke that that's kind of where COVID started. But yes. So we did that segment. And then when we kind of kept going, and it was more for our own personal sanity, I think, to shoot this film. And, we had some great friends like Bryce and obviously John Ennis and Scout Taylor Compton and Adam Bush. And all these great actors were just at home because, no one was working at that point. So we were actually extremely lucky to pull together this cast and this tiny skeleton crew. And we weren't sure exactly what we were going to do with it. We just were like, let's just make this and make it the way we want, we want to present it. And we were so lucky because RLJE saw it and they're like, we want this. And Shudder got on board very quickly, and they've just been championing this project. And, it's so far exceeded what we expected to happen, but it's kind of crazy because that was always our dream choice, dream
That's
team.
awesome.
So
Love that.
yeah, it was super exciting.
Bryce, did you make out with your co-star in this movie?
No, I was unfortunately not. I was sitting next to
a charred corpse.
a charred corpse of my inner self.
Yeah, that's one did you get to was there a cutscene where you got to make out with that charred corpse is what I'm asking.
No, but I got to play
Probably
this
true.
artist, and for those who don't know, Spider's a pretty great a painter as well. So it was fun kind of painting over his big painting and then watching it come to life and destroy me. I love that. So it was great working on a project that, kept the artist in mind and our of course the inner life of the, that we bear on ourselves. All that angst bubbles up.
Well,
Oh yeah, it's funny, Bryce. I had to tell you this. We have a toddler, Spider and I, and she knows the end monologue that my character does, and I thought that was it. And then earlier today, we did an interview with another podcast, and I listened to a couple minutes of it, and they played the trailer, and she started doing your whole monologue in front of the mirror. I was like, "Oh my god!"
Oh, no.
This is a cutest little toddler girl too. Could you imagine her delivering that monologue? That's so great. I love that.
I was like driving, and I just slowly turned. I'm like, "What the hell? We're just breaking our child."
I'm actually waiting to watch it with my daughter who just turned 13 because we have this thing where we watch horror movies together. So I can't
love
wait.
that.
I can't wait to watch it with her. So I'm looking forward. I haven't seen it all compiled together yet, so I'm really looking forward to doing that.
it's
Oh,
good
yay,
stuff.
That's so awesome.
If you got a
Thank
Shudder, I almost said subscription, then go check it out right now. All right, Chrissy, obviously you're into dark stuff. What is your personal paranormal history? Have you had anything that began earlier than the haunted apartment that you and Spider lived in?
Yes, very much earlier. So I think you guys made a joke on the episode that Spider was on that I'm actually haunted, and
That's right.
I heard that,
I remember that. Yeah.
and I was like, oh my god! I think it made me admit a lot of things that I didn't. When you're really scared of something and you don't want to admit it out loud because then it's real. So the first thing I can remember, I was probably 4 or 5, and I was asleep, and it was just me and my mom alone in the house, and I was asleep, and I just heard pots and pans crashing in the kitchen and a huge, bunch of noise. And for some reason it woke me up and it really freaked me out. I felt, and your instinct when you're a little kid is that it's your mom, but something made me get out of bed and not go to the kitchen, but go to her bedroom to check. And she was asleep. And and the kitchen was totally fucked up when I went out there. And
So it wasn't just noise. Things had been moved around and wow.
Yeah. And so I went and I got my mom, and she didn't believe me, but I think she thought that I was dreaming or something. And she made me go back to bed. And probably 5 minutes later, I swear to God, I got smacked in the head so hard. And when I was laying in bed.
What?
Yeah. And so I started screaming, of course. And I remember my mom came in and she was convinced that something must have fallen off a dresser or something and landed on me. And there was nothing. And I was not allowed to have a messy room as a kid. So it's not like there was stuff on it did not happen, but she didn't believe it, probably because she didn't want to.
Mom's in denial, obviously.
Yeah. So that was the first thing I can remember. And I remember being legitimately scared a lot as a little kid of, the dark and being alone. And
Wow.
it seemed to follow me. So, I met my dad when I was 13. And then I finally got to a point where I was going to visit him and his girlfriend in their house. And their house was so haunted. And I don't know if it followed me or if it was just the house, but they had this basement they didn't even go into. They rented and like furniture would move around and you'd hear it. And you'd go down there and everything. Yeah. Everything would be piled in the middle of the room. Like this is like stuff. And my dad will admit this. My dad will talk about this. But my mom, she's like, hell no.
I don't want you to talk about this.
I know.
Like that. I mean, when the furniture's moving, that's a strong force. That's not your average, maybe like a lamp flying across the room. That's crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And we talked about that recently and I hadn't really ever brought it up again because it was just scared me until more recently when Spider thought that it was so awesome that my apartment was haunted that I had to live in alone and he got to go home. So that was not awesome.
Women are much tougher than men. We've proven that on the show.
Seriously.
I want to back up. Yeah. Just curious about where this was where you were growing up.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I am from Vancouver Island in BC, so I'm Canadian. And I lived in a really small town growing up, a couple of them actually, kind of up and down the island. I know Bryce is familiar with the area.
Yeah.
Campbell River was where I was born, and then Duncan, BC, which is, a little further up island. So yeah, that was where it started. My dad lived in Vancouver. So when I went to visit him, he was in Vancouver. And then I had, as I started getting older, some more crazy things happened that other people witnessed even before the apartment. So at that point, I was kind of slowly getting ready to talk about it. But yeah, honestly, until the apartment and Spider going through that experience and being so excited about it, I was like never wanting to talk about it.
Wait, what are the other things that happened to you before the apartment?
Well, okay, so when I moved to LA, I had got this house up in the Hollywood Hills that I had with some friends. And so my side of the house was just mine. And then we kind of locked off a section where my friend and her boyfriend lived. And, he was always really spooked by a lot of things, which was really fun because I used to scare him all the time. But there was one night that it was 4 a.m. My cat was getting all weird, and my cat would always like make these weird sounds and like stare up at the ceiling. And then out of nowhere downstairs, I just hear like a huge crash and then like something smashing. And so I thought someone like threw a rock through my sliding glass door or something, which was terrifying. So my roommate's boyfriend, they couldn't come into the house. They had to go around the outside and knock on the door to get in. And so I slowly go down the stairs. And when I get to the bottom of the stairs, I can see him through the front door looking at me through the glass. And we both realized that I had this like wall-size frame picture hanging on the wall. And it was in the center of the room. Didn't fall off the wall.
This happened later.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this was as an adult. This was ugh, God,
no,
probably
but didn't
like 12
this
years
happen
ago.
again at the?
Oh yeah, no, this
apartment?
is stuff that happened. Yes, this did happen at the haunted apartment, but that was the first time this happened.
So this is a obvious recurring pattern.
Yes. Yeah.
Whoa.
Unfortunately, yeah. That was the worst thing that happened in that house. There was a couple things that were really scary. Because we had the type of doors that would be like front door open, back door open, and that those would happen.
No.
Like the doors would open, the exterior doors all the time by themselves, even when they were locked, which sucked. Wow. But that was the worst one, and also because he was such a chicken. Like we didn't live there much longer. He was so scared after that, and just because we both saw it at the exact same time, so there's no way anybody was making it up. It was just like, yeah.
Have you ever sort of sought the help of like a spiritualist or a medium or a psychic to sort of, must have sent you down a path of like, trying to figure out what the hell is going on, right?
Well, yes, but I know I haven't, and only because of the reason that I was legitimately scared of it.
Yeah, totally.
So, And, I spent a lot of my time living alone, and that, is not comforting, and you don't know if something is dangerous. And
Right.
so I would live a lot in denial. But it's funny you say that. I did have a friend, my guitar player from my band, his wife, she does readings, and that just happens to be something she does. And
Yep.
she came over to the apartment one time early on before it became very known that something was up with this place. And she stood at the end of my bed and she's like, "How do you live here? Oh my God, it is so dark. I don't know how you live here. Like, there's something so bad in this." And I was like, "Stop it." Like, I just, and I kind of shrugged her off. But she was absolutely right. So yeah, that was the closest I came to any kind of reading or anything like that. I've been pushed to do it, but I'm scared of what I might find out.
I mean, you must be saging the shit out of that place, right? Like, I mean, do you use any
I
stuff
don't live
like
there
that?
anymore.
Oh, no,
I moved out.
yeah, right. I mean, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I would carry like sage in my back pocket. Wow, that's wild.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How often was this stuff going on? Was it happening enough that you were like forgetting about it in between instances and then being like, "Oh yeah, I'm haunted," or was it like,
Yeah. There was
a thing?
spaces. Yeah, there was definitely like spaces of time where there wasn't anything like dramatic like that, and years ago. And whether or not something weird may happen, but you can always little things you can shrug off. But any of the major stuff, it didn't really go away for quite a long period of time when I was in that apartment. That was the one time that was like so. And honestly, the house where the picture fell off the wall, there was just something about that house that you never felt safe there by yourself. And even like, my friend's boyfriend, like if she was late from work, he would just come like sit in my living room with me till she got home from work because nobody wanted to be by themselves.
Where in LA was this?
Do you know where the Hollywood Reservoir is up there?
Oh God.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So it's just up there. And we rented it for probably a couple years. And yeah, it got to the point, same thing, where no one wanted to live there anymore. And we're just like, got to get out of here.
Particular, that's a little too close to where I live for me to feel
I wonder if it's your house now.
We're just like, let's all stay away from the whole Hollywood Reservoir area now.
Exactly.
So talk to us about the house that you and Spider were living in. Is it that place where all that activity happened with the keys swinging by themselves with the
yeah, that one, no. So that was actually, when I moved out of the house where the giant picture fell off the wall, I went and I moved to this apartment building, which is the Broadway on Hollywood and Vine, which is a well-known building. And I think it's known to be haunted, but I didn't realize that at the time. So when I moved out of that house, I wanted to go somewhere where I felt really safe because I was living alone. And, they have front door security. No one can get in the building. So I was like, oh, this is great. I love the place. So yeah, I lived there for a little while and it seemed fine. And then little things started to happen. Spider and I think it was really early on of us we started dating. And I remember his kids came over one day to visit and they're young. And that kind of seemed to set everything in motion. Like the ghost either didn't like that or did like that. I don't know. But that's when everything started to get really weird and really obvious. And I remember this one night, the first night it happened, my friend, the same one that had lived in the house with me, she was over and we were recording some music and I kept trying to bounce something off Pro Tools and there kept being voices and interference in the bounce, but the mic was off, everything. It didn't make any sense. And we could not get a clean bounce to the point where we had to trash what we were doing. And we were like totally weirded out by it. And so, I picked up my phone and I opened up my text messages and in where I would send a text, it said his kid's name. And I've never even texted his name. It was like so early on, and it was just like, whoa, that's weird. It's almost like someone was in my phone. And so I told him that story and still, he was like, oh, something weird could have happened in the bounce and blah, blah, blah. But my friend, Michelle, who was with me, she's totally believed it, but she's more open to those things. So then I kind of had planted the seed, and then I'm trying to think what was the next thing in order. I think it was the key thing. So then, because I'd expressed that my cats kept waking up again in the middle of the night and doing the weird thing where it was staring at the ceiling and making weird noises. And so, again, he shrugged it off like, no, your cat's weird, whatever. And then I was going on a work trip for like 3 days, and I was packing in the other room where my bedroom was. And then that was when across the room on the other side of the apartment, like the key started swinging. And it was, you saw it. It was on a key hook with other keys. Both of my cats were on the bed watching me. So it was not the cats. And it just started going, and it went so long. So yeah, I just picked up my phone and started filming it. And I was like, see, you're seeing this, right?
Right.
And so then he was like, still trying to explain it away, but he was like, okay, this is weird. And then it kind of got crazy where, that was when he came over and he was like, hey, you notice your pictures are always crooked. I'm like, yeah, no, I know. Like I had all this art, and it's like this, above my bed, there was 5 large pieces and they were always crooked. And then I had this signed Texas Chainsaw Massacre poster that was also always crooked, but always crooked a certain way. And so, I think he told the story. He straightened it out, went into my bedroom area, went and straightened all my artwork out, came back, and then it was crooked the other way. And then he's like, what the fuck? And I'm like, I wasn't surprised by any of this because this has been something that I'd been experiencing, and there was a lot of weird things that happened in that apartment building anyway. Like one night it was early morning. I was asleep and I heard a really loud sound, and someone had jumped off the roof into the alley, like right outside my window. And so it was just, there was like some weird shit going on in there. And there was this one night that there was like pounding on my door, and I was recording music, so I thought I was just being too loud, but I was feeling very antisocial, so I didn't answer the door. I thought it was security just telling me to be quiet.
I've done that. Yep.
Right. Yeah. So I just
I'm
was
not
like, I'm
here.
not going to do it. Yeah,
Go away.
Exactly. So I just turned it down. Whatever. The pounding happened a few more times, and I just was quiet, and it went away. And then the next morning, I found out there was like a dude running around the hallway with a butcher knife, pounding on doors, trying to get someone to open their door.
Oh,
and they
my
said,
God.
They're like, he seemed like possessed, like he was on mushrooms or something. I'm like, I don't think you'd try to kill someone because you're on mushrooms, but that was really scary. So yeah, so then, with the whole Texas Chainsaw Massacre thing, he took duct tape and he's like, okay, ghost, see what you can do here. And he duct taped the picture down, and we went to bed. And
probably not a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the next morning, I think he had to drive his kids to school. So he got up really early and he went to go make coffee, and he just came into the room like in 1 second later, like white as a ghost. And I was like, what? And he's like, it's not on the fucking wall. And I thought he was joking. And I know he couldn't have did it because, he'd only left the room 1 second ago. So I like get up and I come around the corner, and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre picture was up against a pillar on top of a trash can, like away from the wall. Couldn't have fallen. Yeah. And then the nail was just pushed in. So it was just, yeah.
I mean,
so
Chrissy,
that was,
we might have to move you to the top of the list here after, 200 episodes. And you take the cake. Am I right?
Yeah, 100%.
I just wonder, literally the picture thing that same thing happened before. That have framed. So that to me indicates that this is the same entity that was in the reservoir. You know what I mean? Because so either two things are happening. Either something was following you around, or you just had really bad luck with the places that you lived. But that picture thing to me seems to be like the signature move of whatever this entity is.
Right. And you could be right, which is really scary if that's the case. Unfortunately, things have happened since we've moved from there, so that's kind of why. And it's nice to actually talk to people who believe it, because I don't talk. Yes, yeah. So since
people doubt people. Wow. I was going to say, people doubt these stories and the sincerity. That's crazy to me.
I don't know that they do, but I never feel, you feel more comfortable talking about it with people who, are open to this stuff, because I think you either scare the shit out of people, or, they try to find reasons. Well, maybe it was this. Maybe it was this.
Yeah,
and it's like,
that's
no, you don't
I think
know.
that's all of our first initial gut reaction is like, oh, what can we do to help? Like, how do we I wonder what this is. What does this look like, sound like? Where are some other patterns where this fits in? And as you can see, Michael's already off and running.
If you can solve this, I'm so in, because I can get rid of this.
Well, first of all, I'll say we cannot solve it, but we might be able to refer you to people who could.
Most definitely.
I'm just trying to find the patterns here. What's been going on since? What's the stuff that you're scared to talk about? And I don't mean to scare you. I think I don't think there's anything. Whatever it is just sort of saying, hello, I'm here. Please notice me. You know what I mean? It doesn't seem. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily engage with it, but it seems like if something really horrible from a horror movie were gonna happen, it would have happened by now. You know what I mean?
It's true. It's a lot of buildup at this point.
I'm gonna lead on. I'm gonna just trust that that's the case, because that's what I want to believe.
I feel like you've been through the scariest stuff. You know what I mean? Knock on wood.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? So what's happened since then?
Well, okay. So Spider had mentioned, I'm assuming, the rest of what happened there with the whole the mirror and everything, right?
Yes,
and
with the handprints on
okay.
Yes.
But
Right.
tell your side of the story. Sorry, we're jumping on it.
Well, no. So of course, after that happened, he didn't have to live there. So he was like, this is amazing. Like, I believe in ghosts now, and I'm convinced 100%. And so he was like, let's see what happens, because I would come home and my dining chair would be pushed up against the island in the kitchen and stuff. And, you can always blame those, oh, maybe I pushed it out of the way but realistically you probably didn't. So he would start trying to set things up and I'm like, can we just not, because I kind of don't want to know.
Right.
And so one night I get in the shower and we're gonna go to dinner. So Spider and my friend Michelle were both hanging out waiting for me. And so this is an old department store building. So the ceilings are insane. If I stood on the bathroom counter, I couldn't reach the top of the bathroom mirror. It was just that type of building.
Man.
So when I got out of the shower, at the very top of the mirror, it just said hi in the steam.
Mm-hmm.
And so immediately I'm like, fuck you guys, seriously. And they both had no idea what I was talking about. And obviously the door was locked. I don't even know how they could have did that. So they come in and they're just like, what the hell? And as we're watching, we're seeing these little fingerprints on the condensation above the mirror appear. And I think there's a video somewhere that I have to find of that, because you can actually physically see it. And they look like tiny little fingerprints, and they kind of appear as they go along the wall. And we're just all so freaked out at this point. And so that was when I decided that I'm going to move. And and Spider and I decided we're going to move in together. So I just did not want to live there anymore. And then we started moving all the stuff, and and I had probably a couple more nights in my apartment, and Spider was taking a shower, and he calls me in when he gets out, and same thing, at the top of the mirror there was an S and a line. So we don't know what it was trying to say. It's like he caught it in the middle of it. So it happened to him as well.
I mean, sounds like he was trying to spell Spider's name.
Either his name, or we were like, wonder if it's saying stay, because we were moving out.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Or
So
siesta, nap time.
or that.
maybe,
Yeah.
or,
Exactly.
One of the
I don't know.
three.
That's all I got.
Yeah, so at that point, we're moving out, and the very last thing I moved was my computer and my production setup, and it when we moved it, there was all these weird designs and symbols in my screen in the dust from moving, and we were like, what is that? I think we have a picture of that somewhere too that we should probably pull up for someone to analyze.
Yeah,
but
any of these we'd love.
Man.
But the craziest part of this whole story, so probably a year ago now, so I haven't lived there in, I don't even know at this point, 6 or 7 years or something, say. So I randomly, a friend of mine he had seen my place early on before all the ghost stuff, and he moved to LA, and he's like, I got a place in that building. I just loved it so much. It's so awesome. And I was like, okay. So I went to visit him, and this place, it has, your car can only be valeted because of the security thing. So all the valet guys knew me, because obviously I'd lived there a long time. And so they were like, hey, where have you been? Blah, blah, blah. And I was waiting for my car, and I was talking to them, and they're like, I was like, you know why I moved, right? And they're like, no. I'm like, oh, this place is so haunted. And they're like, and they told me before stories about like parking the cars and they'd see someone in the rearview mirror and there wouldn't be anyone there. And but then they said the craziest thing to me. So they're like, it's crazy you say that because we had this guy who he like is reporting us. He was freaking out. He's going to call the cops on us because he insisted that someone from the building has been in his apartment because there was writing all over his mirror when he took a shower and things were moved around and it was literally and all of his stuff was crooked and they said it without me saying anything. They just started telling me what this guy and I was like, oh my God. So and then they're like, yeah, it was weird because your apartment, I don't know if you know this, someone committed suicide right above your apartment and they didn't find them for a month. And I was like, what?
No.
That's a good place to start looking.
Right? So there's so much history in that building. And if you look online, there's a lot of ghost stories and stuff. But
I mean, that whole area of Hollywood is so freaking haunted. And that whole strip right there around Hollywood and Vine. We're running out of time, but we got to give us one thing that's happened since that's freaking you out.
Okay, so since then we moved to a house that was in Burbank, and we had to move from that house again too. But
it was haunted?
So that wasn't the whole reason, but I didn't. So I started having like the weird sleep paralysis thing where you'd wake up and you'd see something in your room all the time.
Oh, we hear that all the time on this show. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the first thing that happened, but that wasn't the craziest thing. So one morning we get up and we are home alone in the house, and we go into the kitchen, and every single drawer and cabinet was open, every single one in the entire kitchen.
Yeah.
And then it continued to happen for several days when we would go to bed, and then it would sometimes be in like the bathroom, like the drawers would be open.
Yeah.
And then so we set up a nest to try to catch it because we wanted to see on camera. And then so basically you could see the entire kitchen, 2 angles. There was only one small cabinet that we couldn't get in the angle. And our cat was eating in front of it. And all of a sudden the cat just comes like barreling out of the kitchen, slams into the wall and just goes, and we're like, what the fuck just happened? It like flipped his dish. And we go into the kitchen and the one cabinet that wasn't on the camera was open.
No, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's wild.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That was pretty weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you moved out of there.
We moved out of there, and then the house we've lived in, there's only been a couple small things. One was I have a piano in the living room, and it's one of those electric pianos, but it was 4 a.m. and it woke us up blasting. It was playing by itself. It was playing like almost kind of like when you see Allegora, the 6 notes, which I think is where the idea actually came from. It was playing something like that. So it wasn't something that was pre-recorded or could have looped and that could have been turned on. And it was just playing it by itself until we ran and turned the piano off. Yeah, so that was the scariest thing that happened.
I gotta tell you, the problem isn't the house, okay? You gotta nip this thing in the bud. You gotta get a good professional to send this attention-hungry ghost out of your life.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think you might be right. But you said it's not dangerous though. You said it's done its worst, so I'm going to trust you.
But it sounds like I would be living in terror. I'd just be like, oh my God, I can't even make popcorn without, Have you ever, I have 2 questions. One, it was funny that you mentioned the night terror because I had a little bit of a moment listening where I was like, I wonder if she's had any weird recurring dreams while this was going on.
Now I have to think about it.
Like in your night terror, what was how did your night terrors, your sleep paralysis manifest? Like, would you
something
see
was just
anything?
on top of first it felt like something was on top of me, like it was trying to suffocate me. You know, like those dreams where you wake up and you're trying to scream kind of thing.
The incubus.
Yeah, so that would happen, but then I would wake up and I could just see this thing stand, and it was like you couldn't see what it was. It was just a figure, but it was like again one of those things. I didn't tell Spider for probably a year and a half because I was so scared of admitting it, and then it being like, okay, now it's real, and that I don't know. It was one of those things because that actually scared me. Like, see, and it could have been me being half asleep. who knows?
Sure.
But it was really weird, and the sleep paralysis thing is terrifying anyway, when you're like
Yeah.
not fully awake. Yeah,
I
so
would
that
say-
was the worst.
I would say like time to get over the I don't want to admit it. You've now talked about it on the podcast. Like
Yeah.
you should
Yeah.
speak to
That's
a
already gonna
medium.
help. Yeah.
Yeah, you should speak to a medium who's like, I don't think anyone's gonna be like, well, you're fucked. This thing, I just think I think there's probably a simple matter of like, we need to like acknowledge and send this one away and have them detach.
It could be as simple as that,
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
I would say I wouldn't, especially because there's poltergeist activity happening. I wouldn't encourage anything beyond saying something like, I get it. Stop. You need to respect my personal space now. You know what I mean? Like sometimes saying something like that out loud will get it
Mhm.
to calm down, but I wouldn't engage it in a way where you're like, knock 3 times if you can hear us. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, no.
I
Like
wouldn't-
I used to think Ouija boards were funny. No, like I won't do it.
Yeah,
you're
refuse.
with- yeah.
Because like in some of the stories, like that we hear, it's like that really will just make it stronger because it's like now you're giving me energy and that's what I want and attention
Right.
and that's what I want. But I feel like maybe postponing, out, which is a rational thing to do. I don't want to admit this is happening to me. I think
Right.
that might be the postponement might be prolonging everything, and I think it's time. Like we often do in therapy, it's like, okay, time to address the issue at hand here. You know what I mean? Like,
Or,
Oh,
or
God,
get
I
you
just-
or get you on Kindred Spirits with Amy Bruni.
that's true. I mean, maybe wait long enough to have an episode of, about your hauntings on a TV show. But it is Hollywood after
It's my
all.
dream come true.
But yeah, exactly.
No.
Time to talk to a professional, I think, and let's see if we can send this Woody Woodpecker of a ghost on its way.
Well, I think you're right. Like I definitely Spider won't admit this, but when all the cabinets and stuff, he might admit it. But the night when all the cabinets kept opening and all that, he was so freaked out, and he came home kind of drunk one night, which he barely ever does, and it was hilarious. So he just fucking freaked out because all the cabinets were open when we got home, and he's just like, I'm not kidding. Don't fucking open another one of these. He started yelling at it, and it never did it again.
There you go.
Yeah,
there you
right,
go.
right.
My point. There you go. Okay. Interesting. All right. We unfortunately have to take a break, but when we come back, we have more Chrissy with us. So here we go. Send us off, Riley. All right, we're back with KRSY FOX. KRSY, before we get to this week's story of high strangeness, and I gotta say, I have a little preview of what's coming up from Bryce, and I'll say, buckle up. It's we have a scenic route ahead of us. We have to play a game that we play with all of our guests. I'm going to go down a list of phenomenon. If you're open to it, you're going to say believe it. If you're not open to it, you're going to say bullshit. You got to pick one in the moment. We can always circle back and talk about the ones you're on a fence about.
Okay.
This is rapid fire style. This is a game that we call bullshit
or believe it.
All right. KRSY FOX, on your mark, get set, ghosts,
Believe it.
Bigfoot,
Believe it.
aliens,
Believe it.
the Bermuda Triangle,
Bullshit.
parallel dimensions,
Believe it.
psychic vampires,
Bullshit.
spontaneous human combustion,
Bullshit, I hope.
astral projection,
Bullshit, I hope.
Ouija boards,
Believe it.
alien abduction,
Believe it.
Dogman,
Believe it, sure.
Mothman,
Believe it.
sheep squatch,
Bullshit.
ritual magic,
Believe it.
levitation,
Believe it.
the healing power of crystals.
Bullshit.
We're living in a simulation.
50-50. I guess I'll say bullshit.
The government is hiding the truth. about Elvis?
Bullshit.
Alien human hybrids.
Believe it.
Miracles.
Believe it.
Reincarnation.
Believe it.
Destiny.
Believe it.
Life after death.
Believe it.
Well done. I gotta
Well
say,
done.
I
Well
really
done.
respect the unanxious
Yeah.
approach to that list you had.
Michael,
Some of
just
them were more than others.
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
I
like
just
that-
realized as you roll out Dogman, they're like, "Yeah, I'll go with that," and then you hit him with Mothman, and they're like, "Oh," and then he just whaps Sheep Squatch, and
Mhm.
she
yeah,
didn't fall
I
for
feel like
though.
it gets
She didn't fall
that's just
for it.
ridiculous.
Bryce, don't think that I didn't think about there is
Oh, I
an
know.
art to the lists that I'm building each year.
Oh, I
okay?
know.
I do love that. If you draw that line, where you draw that line between the three is always enjoyable to me. Living in a simulation, 50-50 on.
I swear some days I'm completely convinced that that's true. And then other days I'm like, that's just ridiculous. It just really depends on, the day or what's going on. Because I could definitely believe the argument, but I kind of don't want to believe it because it sounds super depressing to me.
I mean, what's the difference at the end of the day? That's how I feel
I guess
about
so.
it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It is what it is. Whatever it is, we're
Yeah.
living in it.
Yeah,
Like,
Yeah.
even if it's created by some all-knowing creator, or if it's not, or if it's a computer simulation, what's the difference?
Yeah, it's Joey
Yeah,
Pants
you're
in the
right.
Matrix eating steak, saying, "I don't want to know."
All right. Well, why don't we get to this week's story of high strangeness? Bryce, what delicious steak are you serving up in the Matrix this week?
Oh boy, Michael, do I have a steak for you? Today, I'm going to tell you a story about a land lost to time, a place of legend initially conceived of by some of the world's most preeminent scientists, a place that would become steeped in occult lore, a place that supposedly produces magical crystals that are apparently too good for us because whilst being sold at a booth at Contact in the Desert, the man behind the stand refused to sell us any. Yeah, I'm talking about none other than Lemuria.
Nice.
Chrissy, have you ever heard of Lemuria?
No.
No.
Please
okay.
tell me.
Okay. Well, you're in
I'm not
for a treat.
very skilled with the
That's okay. It's one of the lost lands like Atlantis and Mu, but we're going to get into all
You
that.
know,
because-
like Atlantis and Mew.
Equally
Because
well known.
seeing as how this is the jet ski summer, I felt as though it wouldn't be a complete package without discussing Lemuria. See, Michael, I care.
Yeah. I mean, if you were going to pick one lost continent to do during jet ski summer, I think it would be Atlantis. But sure, let's go with Lemuria.
Yeah, let's start here, and you'll see why. Now, I'd like to start by reading you an article from LA's very first newspaper, the Los Angeles Star. This article is dated May 22nd, 1932. The descendants from a long-lost race from a vanished continent are alive and well and living on the slopes of Mount Shasta in Northern California, claimed reporter Edward Lancer, who had first learned about these people while traveling at night on the Shasta Limited, the train taking him to Portland, Oregon. From the train's observation car, Lancer had seen strange red and green lights illuminating Mount Shasta. Intrigued, he asked the conductor, who of course told him,
That's the work of the Lemurians. They're holding ceremonies.
Well, flabbergasted and sensing a scoop, Lancer decides to set out on a little expedition straight into the heart of Mount Shasta wilderness, not only in search of a story for his newspaper, but also to find out more about these supposed first inhabitants of Earth and their sacred ceremonies. So Lancer travels to the little-known town of Weed in Northern California, where a few of the locals, I've been there, tell him they
I was
too.
just there this summer. I was
Me
I
too.
was here during
Great town.
jet ski summer.
Love that weed. Tell him they too have seen the strange lights on Mount Shasta, and that they are the work of an ancient race of mankind who inhabit a mystical village on the mountain, an ancient race known as the Lemurians. Only there's a problem. Well, actually, there's a multitude of problems, but we'll get into more of that later on. Apparently,
One of them being I covered most of this in the Mount Shasta episode that you
Yes.
weren't in.
Okay. Well,
Clearly
it's good to
never
makeup
listened
assignment.
to.
That's a
yeah. Well,
assignment.
it's good to hit it from a couple different
I actually
angles.
don't
We're
know.
expanding the subject.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much of Lancer was in that. So this is I have a feeling this will be a good perspective on it.
Oh, I think so too. This is a rare source. Now, apparently, no one was ever able to enter the sacred precincts of the Mount Shasta colony to see for themselves, or at least no one had ever made it out alive to tell the tale. However, there was one man who seemed to know more than most, a man by the name of Professor Edgar Lucen Larkin, an eminent scientist who had somehow managed to become an expert on this Lemurian settlement on Mount Shasta. So as any good reporter worth his or her salt, Lancer set out to meet this Professor Larkin, who apparently
penetrated the Shasta wilderness as far as he could or dared, and then cleverly continued his investigations from a promontory with a powerful long-distance scope.
Yeah, right. This guy just sets up a tree blind and uses a big scope to spy on the Lemurians. And while he's doing that, he sees a beautiful temple. And it's a masterpiece of architecture, right? Made of marble and onyx. And it's from his perch that Professor Larkin is able to quietly observe Lemurian behavior and essentially become an expert on the matter. Now, no one actually ever entered the sanctity of the Lemurian village to find out if they were a warlike people or not. It was just sort of generally assumed that they were a peace-loving race, living as their ancestors once did before their homeland sank beneath the sea. Now, Lancer, who talked to a good number of the locals in Weed, had determined that there was probably a good chance they did in fact run into a Lemurian or two, even if they didn't know it at the time. And he thought so because he heard strange reports of weird-looking individuals who would occasionally come into town to trade for supplies, purchasing huge quantities of sulfur, salt, and lard, and exciting the shopkeepers by paying with large gold nuggets worth much more than the run-of-the-mill products they were purchasing. Now, Michael, do those ingredients catch your attention? Sulfur, salt, lard?
Well, I feel like you're going into the fairy realm food and salt territory here.
Yeah,
I mean,
it
sulfur
does.
obviously is the smell of, people
Demonic
talk about
presence, entities.
Salt wards
all that.
off unwanted spirits, and then lard, like fat, like that's like the type of stuff that like fairies want to come eat. Little elves and fairies want to eat and raid your pantries at night. KRSY.
It's a strange thing. Yeah. Now, through these detailed accounts of the shopkeepers, Lancer was able to get a general description.
Lemurian was tall, barefoot, noble-looking, with close-cropped hair, and dressed in spotless white robes.
Now, by now, the poor newspaper reader's probably wondering how in the hell any of this could be true. And if it was, how was it possible that this race of mystical humans were able to avoid detection for so long? Well, Lancer provided the answer in his account and said that the Lemurians had possessed the secret powers of the Tibetan masters, which enabled them to blend with their surroundings and vanish at will, and that no one had ever penetrated their secret village because they had encircled it with an invisible protective boundary. According to Lancer, the Lemurians' knowledge far exceeded our own, and although they'd lived in America for hundreds of thousands of years, a place that they called Gustama, they never forgot their homeland of Lemuria, which they honored in their sacred light ceremonies held on the slopes of Mount Shasta. As incredible as all this sounds, I'm sure you can guess, no other investigator or reporter could confirm Lancer's story, and no other witnesses came forward other than Professor Larkin, who would remain the only eyewitness to the Lemurian village. And perhaps that's because his title of preeminent scientist might have been a little padded, let's say. It turns out Professor Larkin...
Me?
Yeah.
Falsified documents?
Yeah.
Woo-hoo.
It turns out he was just an elderly occultist who ran the Mount Lowe Observatory, which was being run by the Pacific Electric Railway as a tourist attraction at that time. And Professor Larkin's job there was to point out different stars and constellations to visitors on the giant telescope, kind of like a third-year astronomy student.
That's the Big Dipper. Don't ask me about the others, because that's the only one I know.
Now, of interesting note, the Mount Wilson Observatory, just right down the road, was literally doing real scientific work ever since the turn of the century. It's funny that they were right next to each other. Now, in reality, this wasn't the first time someone would connect Mount Shasta to Lemuria, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. In fact, long before the LA Star article ever got published, a writer by the name of Frederick Spencer Oliver published an occult novel entitled A Dweller on Two Planets in 1894 under the name Phyllis the Tibetan, a book which claimed that survivors from a sunken continent called Lemuria were living in a series of complex tunnels beneath Mount Shasta. Locals would sometimes see the creatures wandering outside the mountain in white robes. And then in 1931, Harvey Spencer Lewis, using the pseudonym Weiser Spenny Survey, wrote Lemuria, the Lost Continent of the Pacific, a book about the hidden Lemurians of Mount Shasta. And it's really this book that's widely regarded as the reason for the popularity for the legends of Lemurians in Mount Shasta. Now, the fictional accounts of Lemurians, hey, that's pretty easy to dismiss, right? But as far as the land of Lemuria is concerned, I would say slow your roll, because the concept of Lemuria was developed by scientists trying to account for striking resemblances between the rocks and fossils of Central India and South Africa, as well as other peculiar flora and fauna. But it was one animal in particular that sparked a hot debate amongst evolutionists and creationists, an animal related to both man and monkey. I'm talking about the lemur. That's right, the cute little mammal that looks like a cross between a monkey and a squirrel that lives mainly on the island of Madagascar. But it's also found in Africa, India, and the Malay archipelago, leaving a lot of naturalists and biologists scratching their heads wondering, how was it that these little creatures could have spread across such a vast, empty ocean? Well, the biologists had a solution. They postulated that there must have been some sort of a huge landmass, a hidden continent that existed at a time when mammals were still evolving, that for some reason had sunk to the bottom of the ocean. Then in 1864, English zoologist Philip L. Sclater suggested that the continent be called Lemuria in honor of the lemur. Eminent scientists were quick to get on board with the hypothesis. Albert Russel Wallace, who developed the theory of evolution simultaneously with Darwin, had this to say.
This is undoubtedly a legitimate and highly probable supposition, as it is an example of a way in which the study of the geographic distribution of animals may enable us to reconstruct the geography of a bygone age.
That's right. Even German naturalist Ernst Heinrich Haeckel was excited by the idea. He suggested that if Lemuria existed, it could potentially solve a hotly debated matter of far greater significance than the spread of lemurs, namely, the origin of man. Charles Darwin's theory of evolution proposed that man was descended from apes, but in the mid-19th century, no fossils connecting ape and man had yet been found. Although in truth, fragments of the Neanderthal man had already been found, it wouldn't be identified until later. Haeckel believed that the intermediate evolutionary stages of man had taken place on Lemuria, and that the fossil evidence had disappeared with the continent. With new leading theories like plate tectonics and continental drift, we have no long since done away with the need for a Lemuria-type place of origin, just as other theories have been found to account for the distribution of the lemur, and we don't need to get into that here. But for the sake of our story, the Lemurian train had already left the station, or shall I say, the Shasta Limited. And it didn't take long for upstart occultists to jump aboard the moving train, like Helena Blavatsky, founder of the Theosophical Society and widely considered to be one of the greatest occultists of all time, as well as Austrian occultist Rudolf Steiner, member of the Order Temple Orientis. Both doubled down on this idea of a lost Lemurian continent, and especially its imagined inhabitants filled with supernatural abilities and powers. Pretty shaky ground to build an entire framework of centuries-old occult beliefs, but that's what they did. In 1888, she published her magnum opus, The Secret Doctrine, and in it, Blavatsky set out her philosophy, which would give her readers insight into the ancient wisdom imparted to her by the Brotherhood of Mahatmas, ethereal beings who were said to run the world from their Tibetan headquarters. Madame Blavatsky maintained that her book was based on an ancient work called the Book of Daizan, which the Mahatmas had shown her during their astral visits. But the Book of Daizan, she says, was written on palm leaf pages and had been composed in Atlantis in the now forgotten Censar language. Besides describing Atlantis, it dealt with the lost continent of Lemuria. Blavatsky described the Lemurians as gigantic, brainless, ape-like creatures, which I think is pretty interesting. But according to Blavatsky, some of the Lemurians had 4 arms, and some had an eye in the back of their head, which gave them psychic vision.
Okay.
They had no... They had no... Well, and she would go on to say that the eye in the back of the head would later go on to form what's known as our pineal gland. But more on us and how we
in
all...
the front of our head.
I
right?
know,
Not
I
the
know.
Back. I think
It moved
Blavatsky-
over
It
time.
moves. And she said they spoke language using telepathy instead of method of they used telepathy, and they lived in caves and holes in the ground, and although they had no proper brain, they could use their willpower to literally move mountains.
He's
Now, after
dumb, but he's pretty powerful with that big brain of his.
I mean, it's strange, right? After Blavatsky's death in 1891, her successor, Annie Besant, wrote at length on the subject of Lemuria and its people, as did leading British theosophist W. Scott Elliott, who put the finishing touches on Madame Blavatsky's Lemuria with astonishing counts based on occult revelations he had received from the Theosophical Masters. From Scott Elliott's description, the Lemurians were far from beautiful. They were between 12 and 15 feet tall. They had a roll of flesh that took the place of a forehead. Their skin was brown and their eyes were set so far apart that they could see sideways as well as forwards. Lemurians...
I feel like everyone's just trolling each other now with these Lemurian descriptions.
Yeah, it's true. And basically his whole face was curiously flattened and just a hideous creature. And better yet, the Lemurians had also domesticated this wild, monstrous lizard that they would walk on a leash made out of twisted creeper, and they used these sinister monsters as hunting companions.
This is
Now,
like
according-
early Marvel comics where they're just like, but no one is paying attention to like continuity or canon, so they're just like, now Captain America has a pet crocodile and his face is disgusting. It's
No,
just
totally.
like they're just reinventing stuff, trying to top the person who came before them. Meanwhile, the audience is like, wait, what? What are the new rules in this universe? I don't understand.
I mean, that's pretty much exactly what's happening. It was Lemurian world building at its finest. And
Iron
according
Man
to
has
Elliot-
a belly button in his back.
According to Elliot, the Lemurians started out as egg-laying hermaphrodites, but by the time their 5th subrace evolved,
Obviously.
they were producing as we do. Now, I should mention here that the Theosophists described the emergence of life on Earth in terms of root races, and that our planet is destined to have 7 root races, each composed of 7 subraces. Now, the 3rd root race was the Lemurians. The 4th root race were the Atlantean humans, who were destroyed through black magic, and we, humans, are the 5th root race. And get this, the 6th will evolve from us and return to live on Lemuria. You see how that all comes back full circle like that? Isn't that nice?
I mean, this all sounds like white nonsense. I just gotta say, I don't like this conversation about root races at all. It makes me very uncomfortable.
Today it's tainted terminology. But what she was describing was, indigenous cultures around the world have described sort of like the world has suffered certain catastrophic events and certain epochs, and I think that's what they were referring to. But
Yeah.
as I was saying, the Lemurians started out as egg-laying hermaphrodites, but by the time their 5th subrace evolved, they were producing as we do. However, during their sexual progress, they foolishly interbred with beasts, producing the apes that still populate our planet. Occult science, y'all.
Oh, man.
Oh my god.
That's
During
science. That's science for you.
During the period of the 6th and 7th subraces, Lemuria began to break up as various parts of the continent sank. But a peninsula of Lemuria that extended into the North Atlantic grew into, any guesses?
Florida.
Mount Shasta.
Atlantis. That's right. Atlantis grew from the remains of Lemuria. Then it's basically like Game of Thrones for the next 100,000 years or so, with the remaining Lemurians fighting with the new Atlanteans, and shit just gets crazy. According to LemurianConnection.com, Michael, could you please read this as a highly evolved Lemurian, please?
I really don't want to because I really am upset by this whole thing, but sure, for the sake of the show.
Thank you.
Here we go. Apologies in advance if I end up saying something that sounds remotely racist.
Dissension between Atlantis and Lemuria arose regarding the development and evolution of other civilizations. We Lemurians believe that the other less evolved cultures should be left alone to continue their own evolution at their own pace according to their own understandings and pathways, whereas the Atlanteans believe that less evolved cultures should be controlled by the two more evolved civilizations. This argument over ideologies resulted in several thermonuclear wars, which weakened both our continental plates. When the wars were over and the dust had settled, there were no winners, only death, destruction, and further debasing of the human spirit, to the point that both sides realized the futility of such behavior.
Yes, that's right. Well done. And so what do the Lemurians do? They decide they're going to take their ball and go play somewhere else. That's right. They're going to build a separate society away from everyone. Any guesses as to where that might be?
Mount Shasta?
That's right, Riley. Inside Mount Shasta.
Are we being indoctrinated right now?
Where they would be safe from any more conflict on the surface of the earth. Safe inside Mount Shasta, where the remaining 200,000 Lemurians built the crystal city of Telos.
Okay.
Doesn't that sound like a Marvel Universe city, Telos?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
this is the stuff. There's a lot of stuff that, I mean, honestly, if you want me to answer this question, like Jack Kirby was into all this stuff, and when I really believe when he created the Inhumans, which lived in a crystal city, I believe, in the middle of a mountain, a lost mountain. They were like a lost ancient race that the aliens had created, and they all had like magic powers and superpowers. They originally started in the Fantastic Four, and I really think this was his like take on the Lemurians. Atlantis is in Marvel Comics, so he was like into all this stuff and making it all like comic booky and pulpy, which is cool because that's what it is. It's comic book pulp. You know what I mean?
Well, and you know, it's hard to get through here too, just how big of a significance Madame Blavatsky played on the occultist world and the Theosophist Society. I mean, this was groundbreaking stuff, and people just engaged with it hook, line, and sinker. Now, you know, it's said today that Telos houses 1.5 million Lemurians, so they probably had to do a few add-ons. Modern day believers say that Lemuria can be felt and contacted through spiritual practices. The Lemurians were a highly evolved spiritual race, so they can be contacted through spiritual messages from believers. And it's also believed that the Lemurians use crystals as communication tools. The Lemurians program these crystals to teach their messages of oneness and healing. And obviously, crystals are revered by modern day Lemurian believers. Now, the physical appearance of Lemurians, as Michael was referencing, has almost been as hotly debated as Lemuria itself. Some believe Lemurians look like highly evolved humans, like a hot, tall Ryan Gosling with long hair, while others believe they have more animalistic qualities, like a troglodyte or even, dare I say, a Bigfoot. Where do you guys land on these Lemurians, hot or not? Chrissy?
I mean, wow. Have you guys ever been to Mount Shasta?
I have.
I mean, okay. So we spent an evening there because we were on tour.
Did you go to the Gold Room or whatever that place was called?
No, we didn't go in the city. We were on tour, and our merch guy got food poisoning. So we were pulled over on the side of the road in the middle of like the woods at night, and I could just see. I could see it being more of like a Hills Have Eyes type thing than any of this. I'm not sure.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what to say. I don't know if I've ever heard a story quite like that. So thank you, Bryce.
Well, you're welcome. Well,
Chrissy, it's not done yet. So
yeah.
Oh, there's more.
Oh,
yeah,
there is more.
Yeah, I'm going to
just
bring it
wanted you to
home.
weigh in if you think
Yeah.
that the Lemurians are hot
I'm
or.
going to bring it
I
around.
mean, I definitely don't think they're hot, but that's just
okay. Riley, you want to weigh in? Hot or not?
They might be. You know, like I like the idea they're in their flowing robes and they're just
Yeah.
really vibey.
You could
They're
be a
just coming down
Lemurian.
like, hey man, you got any sulfur? Salt, lard.
I'm gonna go with I'm gonna like keep this in the Jack Kirby realm and say like some are hot, some are not. They're like a mixed bag. Like where
Just
you know,
all
like
over
they,
the place.
they kind of have like their own. They're kind of like the X-Men mutants, you know, where like some of them are Jean Grey and then some of them are Jean Leach. That's a deep cut for people who know what I'm talking about. You know, you can be like an ugly mutant or you can be a hot mutant. So I think you get both.
Yeah. Well, in closing, my Club Scouts, what began as speculation in the minds of biologists looking for a land bridge in the Indian Ocean had developed into a complex occult world picture centered on both Atlantis and Lemuria, which, depending on whose story you'd like to go on, might once have joined together in a single massive continent that covered practically the entire southern hemisphere and stretched all the way into the North Atlantic. Now, interestingly enough, it was this wild theory of a lost Lemuria that eventually led scientists to develop the Pangea theory, which states that all of Earth's continents were once part of an enormous single landmass called Pangea, a theory that's widely accepted today. Now, as far as the inner life of the Lemurian goes, maybe there's a germ of truth to these accounts of highly civilized society and their lost continent. You know, like we talked about, all these cultures seem to have an antediluvian world mythology, a paradise that existed before a series of catastrophic global events took place. And who knows? We know so very little about our past and origins. History is up for grabs, as Graham Hancock likes to say. Also, can we really rule out this idea of astral clairvoyance, or the ability to channel information from interdimensional or extraterrestrial sources? I don't think so. For thousands of years, people have reported receiving strange messages from cryptic sources, whether from a burning bush, a talking plant, aliens, or a galactic council of 9. We are on the receiving end of some type of transmission. Some occultists believe that even Plato himself might have used this method of astral clairvoyance to travel back through time whilst compiling his Atlantis story. Maybe there was a Lemuria, or whatever you want to call it. Maybe there are Lemurians. I don't know, but what I do know is that still to this very day, people are flocking to Mount Shasta in search for Lemurians and their spiritual enlightenment. And maybe it's like Blavatsky foretold. The sixth race will evolve from us and return to the lost homeland of Lemuria, which, according to legend, is underwater, which could mean, you know what? We're going to develop into mermen and merwomen and rule the world.
Oh, God.
That's our destiny.
Fascinating
That checks
stuff.
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Chrissy, what do you think? Bullshit or believe it? Lemuria.
You know, I'm never someone to say that anything is possible. I mean, I believe in aliens. I believe in a lot of shit. But I mean, this seems like maybe a little bullshit. I'm still probably gonna have nightmares about this tonight. But
How
How about you, Michael Riley? What do you make of all this Lemurian fervor?
Riley?
I mean, I think it's pretty wrapped up in like the new agey, like kind of, you know, it's a very embellished. I mean, who knows about the original human societies, right? Like that, there is so much undocumented history from before the modern era. Like, who knows where the continents were and who was doing what and all that.
Right.
This
right.
specific stuff, you know, the details. It's like we've got an account from like a guy with a telescope in weed.
Yeah, or being paid astral visits
Yeah.
by
Right. Or
know,
we've got
ascended
astral
masters.
visits.
Right.
Yeah. That said, I think I've mentioned before on the podcast when I was inducted into the Source family, which is like an early.
Oh
It was like
Yeah,
an
we
original
talked about
cult.
this on
We
Matt
talked about
Worley's
this.
episode with Mount
well,
Shasta.
The name I was given was Telos Aquarian, so I have like a
No, water
know.
crystal.
Yeah.
a little soft
Dude.
spot in my heart for the old Lemurian.
You know,
but
the
no,
one thing they all agreed on is that Lemurians were tall. And,
Right.
you know, Riley.
yeah, I got
Riley,
tall. I got the long hair.
You got the
I
long
love,
hair.
I
the-
love flowing
got the-
robes. You know,
that beautiful
it
face.
works. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with Riley on the like, I like the idea of like there was an ancient civilization, maybe global situation, and then like there was nuclear war, and then there was a long period where like society rebuilt itself. Like that's fun dystopian sci-fi perhaps. Like I have room for that. The stuff that makes me uncomfortable when we get into like specifically the West Coast and all these like people in the 1930s coming out and being like,
Mhm.
there's a race of like ascended masters living here. It seems to skip over the very important part of history where European settlers committed genocide and took this land away from the people that were there. And I feel like this type of stuff seems to sort of, for lack of a better term, sorry, I'm on a soapbox here, but like it tends to like whitewash history a little bit, right? And sort of point
Mhm.
to like a history that we wished existed, because then we didn't have to admit about the atrocities that happened, in
Right.
order to settle on the West Coast.
A
So it's
distraction. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and sort of ignoring the actual recent history. It's sort of like coming up with a new mythology and a new history. And so
Mm,
that stuff always really makes me a little like irksome, you know what I mean? But
yeah.
the Jack Kirby version of it, the pure science fiction version of it, of like ancient weirdos living in a mountain and paying locals gold for rock salt. I love that shit. You know what I mean?
Right,
But I
right. I'm
think
here for it. Yeah.
I think a lot of it is like revisionist history to sort of make white people feel better about what actually occurred on the, in the West and in this
Mhm.
entire country, frankly. But
Yeah.
that's all. I just want to like put that, not to like spoil it, because again, love the Inhumans by Jack Kirby, but this stuff always makes me a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, totally. For me in researching this, I just didn't realize how how close Blavatsky's Theosophist Society connected with us here in California. It was just kind of like, oh wow, it all kind of came full circle, and because you always hear such a lot about those great occultists that wrote those big books, and so it's interesting to have some perspective as to
Yeah.
where they're laying down their mythology and why.
Yeah, it's a lot of, because then it also gets into creepy stuff. Like this stuff also seems to feel very like master racy to me a little bit too. And then we get
Yeah.
in, and this stuff was also like, the Nazis were into this occultist stuff and this ancient master race stuff. So I always get a little uncomfortable. I think it's worth
Yeah.
doing, maybe not for the show, but maybe for the show, like what was going on with this big spiritual movement? What was going on? What was the appeal of like, hey, history's not what we think it is? For me, I feel like it's got to be because history is so horrible that people want to ignore it. But it is weird that there are these like societies and occult groups, and even out here in Hollywood there's like the Crotona Society was settling, and like there's like there is this period of the spiritual movement that kind of comes out, this early new age stuff that's really weird, and I don't know why it was so popular.
Yeah, I think people feel a deep connection to a source outside of themselves and possibly even outside of this planet.
Yeah, I think there's that, and I think when people have like claimed land that isn't there, they want to come up with new mythology that makes them feel okay that they're there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
kind
well
of how I
said.
feel about it. All right.
Well, there you go.
There you go.
what a note to end
BCC
on.
jet ski summer, roaring through some uncomfortable
Summer
issues. Chrissy, well
Chrissy,
done, Bryce. That
thank
was
you.
very well reported.
Of
Chrissy, where can people find you? Where can people find Allegoria and follow your work?
Yes, so Allegoria is out on Shudder right now. If you have a Shudder subscription, not a prescription, and if otherwise, it's on VOD, available now. And my Instagram is KRSY FOX or One Fox Productions. Twitter is Knee High Fox, and Facebook's KRSY FOX.
Great.
Perfect.
Anything else to plug coming up other than the movie that you guys, any shows or anything?
Well, right now, I mean, if you want to go check out Spider on the Freaks on Parade tour right now, they're out He's out with his brother Rob Zombie and Mudvayne and Static X. They're going across the US right now. And Spider and I actually just finished our most recent film called Bury the Bride. So watch out for that probably
Cool.
later this year, early next year.
Love it.
Nice.
Sounds great. You can follow us at Bigfoot Collectors Club on Instagram, at Bigfoot Pod on Twitter. Check out my other podcast, Slate Your Name. Season 1 is available right now. I'm talking to actors about acting and the disappointment, the highs and lows of the business. Bryce is on an episode. We had a fantastic conversation. If you are an actor and you're looking for a little bit of audition coaching or maybe some help with your acting work, you can email me and book a coaching session with at bookitwithmike@gmail.com. Bryce, anything to plug?
No, yeah, go see Allegora, and that's it.
Great.
He's great in it.
He is
you
great
are
in
too.
it.
Thank you. Right on.
Riley, what you
Right on. I'll leave it at that. I have nothing to plug.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Our pleasure. Oh my gosh.
I mean, the most haunted woman we've ever had on the podcast.
Truly.
I'm honored.
Yeah.
We can talk
get the
off
title.
air.
Secured
if
the
you-
title for sure.
Yeah, if you want some help maybe with this. If not, that's okay. We're not going to push you to do anything you don't want to do. But we do have some friends that could probably help with this situation.
We do, for sure.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I mean, maybe we should do a live on your podcast.
Oh,
Here
you
we
know I love
go.
the sound of
Now
that.
you
Oh, God.
really bringing the vision. We appreciate it. All right, everybody. Thanks again to KRSY FOX. Until next time, good night.
And of course, go get regressed. Bigfoot Collectors Club is produced by Riley Bray and Michael McMillan and scored and engineered by Riley Bray. Our theme song, Come Alone, is by Suneaters, courtesy of Lotuspool Records. Do us a favor and support the show and unlock 3 bonus episodes every month by becoming a member of our Patreon, BCC The Other Side, which can be found at patreon.com/BigfootCollectorsClub.